Okay, kids and grandkids and daughter-in-law and all, if you've been watching this, I got a message for y'all. This has, the filming part of it, taken way more minutes than I thought possible. But I'm probably 2/3 of the way there, is all. And if I'm this far in, I might as well finish. Little technical problem has arisen. Oh, this is nice. It just broke. Now I gotta suck the Coke out of it. I have 64 gig of storage on my iPhone. I have hit 63.4. I offloaded a bunch of apps and the data attached to them, and within 2 or 3 more half-hour sessions, I was in the same place. Music was 9 of my 64 gigs. I tried, there was some way to like offload it without deleting it. Theoretically, that would free up a few gigs and I could continue. It was stopping recordings. Well, I did that. It didn't friggin' work. It stopped the next one at like 11 minutes. So I have deleted all of my music in the hopes that I would have enough room to finish this. And since we have an Apple Music family plan, I can reload any music I want at any time. All right, end of that. Sheri Thornburg Dawson. Sheri and I met at Kmart, 46 and Vine, Lincoln, Nebraska, where we both worked. This was during the period of time I was still shy, intimidated, and scared of young ladies. So, rather than go up to Sheri Thornburg Dawson and ask her out, I did what you would expect. I found kind of a Nerf gun, and she was back in her area working and didn't see me arriving, and I shot her with that little Nerf gun, a little baby Nerf ball that struck her in her buttocks. Now, if you know Sheri isn't very wide, but we've always said she's deep. So it hit her in her deep load, not wide load. So that led to various shenanigans. We had a thing called the pick. It was a picture frame, it was clear plastic, and the paper on it said the pick. The pick got started, I assume, by me, and passed back and forth innumerable times. It could have been 20 times this stupid thing went back and forth. And we actually have a wedding picture holding the pick. As a for instance, it ended up in both of our cars, our locked cars. So there was a crime committed by her. Next, and these are just random stories, no particular order. Sheri knew that Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac made my heart go pitter-patter, and she thought that was sick, and unnatural. However, she bought me a VHS tape of Stevie Nicks for Christmas one year, and on there were 10 videos of Stevie singing, but most importantly, moving around like a little snake. Thank you, Sheri. We used to dance, yes, me dance, sorta, to a song called Shout. And kind of the high point was, you know, it makes me want to shout, shout. So we'd do that crap. And also, there was a point in the song where it said, a little bit softer now. And it'd say that over and over and over. And so you'd kind of get lower and lower on your knees, and then fall over, and you're on your back, and you're wiggling around like a tortoise. And then it would say, a little bit louder now, and you'd eventually get up, and you're back to doing this. That was also at the wedding. We got engaged at Pioneers Park in Lincoln. There was a big old Indian statue at Pioneers Park, and we got engaged in the spring, and as a result, it was just muddier than heck, and we needed to wear galoshes, rubber boots, to get to the stinking Indian. I have no idea what she was thinking, but that's what we had to do. Sheri got screwed on the Phil Dawson engagement scale. My next one was in a hot air balloon over Seattle with Fifi. And my last one, so far, David, is or was Cindy on the ice skating rink at Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. Sheri, muddy boots, those stories. I worked at Target after we got married. We lived in a one apartment complex, Tudor Heights at 108th and Maple. Interestingly, so did Eric, and so did Adam. We owned that place. And in fact, Sheri and I, before we moved in, sang, "We're talking today, we're talking today." I have no idea why, but we're ready to move out, buy a house. In order to put enough money together to have a down payment, I worked at Target also as a checkout supervisor, nights and weekends for several months. We ended up buying a house, 5418 North 61st Street, in a rough part of town, but one where for $34,500 you could get a 2-bed, 1-bath, 1-car garage palace. And that's where Adam was brought into the world. This was rude of her, and I don't forgive her to this day. Pillsbury, the baking and dough company, had a character, the Pillsbury Doughboy, and he was in their commercials. And the big thing about the Doughboy, during the commercial, they'd poke a finger into his gut and it would sink way in because he's made of dough, and he would go, Sheri used to call me Pills. So apparently I've always been a fat ass, which I think came on me about my mid-30s. So, Eric Dawson, Ryan Dawson, watch yourself. Travel with Sheri. The Alaska cruise. I'm going to assume, I know Eric and Ryan know the gist of that trip, which was phenomenal. That's the one where we ended up at the captain's table, treated like a king and a queen, and at the end of which I said to Sheri, well, we're done traveling. And she went, what? And I said, we will never have an experience to top that one, so why go? You two guys, if the Davises and Caris and Laws of the world would like to hear the story, I'm sure you can tell it. Okay, I worked at May Telemarketing for a couple of years, and during that time, Mike May invited Sheri and I to a Club Med, little resort chain, at Sonora Bay, Mexico. And so we went. Two memorable things. They had an island about a mile away, aptly named Seal Island. Seals were everywhere. I was scuba diving back then, and I had my suit on. I'm underwater 20 or 30 feet. The seals didn't like that I was in their backyard, or apparently didn't like it. And I say that because they would come barreling at me at full seal speed. I don't know, 15, 20 miles an hour. They were zipping underwater. And they'd get like a foot from my head and then veer off. And cripe, that was scary, honestly. And the second thing, that's the only place I ever wind surfed. Look, I was young, I was strong, I was in shape, I friggin' wind surfed. The surfboard is laying in the water, and there's a sail laying over on its side, flat, in the water. And the game is, you have to stand up on the surfboard and then pull the sail out of the water and hold onto it with two arms and catch the wind properly to move forward. Believe it or not, I don't know, it takes you 100 times before you can get on that board. It's on your knees. Well, first you got to pull up with your arms, of which I have no more. Not that I ever did. And then get your knees on, and then eventually stand up. Jesus, had to take me 100 times. One time we wake up in Omaha and it's 30 below zero. And I said, that isn't gonna work. We are not staying here when it's 30 below. One of the 3 couples we met on the fabulous Captain's Table Alaskan cruise were 40 or so years old, and they lived in Phoenix. So I called them up and I said, it's too damn cold to be in Omaha. Can you put us up for a couple of days? They, being great people, they said yes. Here's the fun part. We left when it was 30 below. When we arrived in Phoenix 2.5 hours later, it was 100. So the part I like telling is, in 2 hours, we picked up 130 degrees. The way Sheri tells it, we were together for 20 years, and there were like 3 sections to it. Section 1, first 10 years, bliss on both our parts, not the least of which because our sons were born. Life was pretty good. Then, as she puts it, 5 years, so 10 great ones, 5 more years, 10 to 15, that sucked. Problem is, she never told me about it until the famous list, wherein she and I were driving down West Dodge one day, and I made some typical smart-ass remark, and she said, "Ow," and she talked like this, "Ow, there's another one for my list." List? I said, my melodious voice. List? What list? And she said, "I've been keeping a list of what an asshole you are," writing things down. Oh, okay. Could you read off what's on the list? And she had 10 or 11 things. And I said, well, let's look at that list in a year and see how many of those I was able to change my behavior. And she was horribly pessimistic about it. And a year later, we're driving down West Dodge, and I pull out the list and hand it to her and say, read me the list and tell me how I've done on each. Well, I went 11 for 11. Every friggin' thing she wanted to bitch about, I fixed. Per her, not per me. So I said, oh, and I knew that. I said, oh, okay, well, here's my list. And I had 10 things on it. The first one, no kidding, was read the Omaha World Herald every day. Sheri freaking exploded. That's not fair. And I went, reading the paper? So I didn't even bother with numbers 2 through 10. Waste of time. Well, now we're 15 years in. The last 5 years, years 15 to 20, included marriage counseling together in the same room, probably every 2 weeks for 5 years. I look back on that and it's weird. Why would we have kept going and stayed together if, kind of obviously in hindsight, we weren't making much, if any, progress? But we did. I learned something that I will never forget in there, and it is, when I'm right, I know I'm right, and there isn't any doubt I'm right. Well, my counselor says, Phil, sometimes 2 + 2 has to be 5. And I thought, now there's some wisdom, because her point was, if you're always right, and if you make it known that you're always right, eventually, and probably not even eventually, pretty quickly, the other person just kind of clams up. What is the point in debating something, arguing about something, if you're going to lose every time? Even if you're wrong, you're going to lose, and that asshole in front of you is maybe going to make darn sure you are. 2 + 2 has to be 5. Somewhere in year maybe 19, Sheri and I were very close to calling it quits, and I told her I would take a year off to work on our marriage. And this, of course, is after she said no to my famous list. So I offered to take a year off and work on the marriage, and fortunately, I had built CFO services to a point I could do that. The place would run and do well. She said no. Okay. You will never know how strange it was knocking on the door of our house on 159th Ave. Knocking on the door to be let in to my house. I have a little piece about Sheri working at CFO services, but I've covered that. Also a line, by the way, she filed for divorce, not me. She wanted to get married to Mike. I don't remember his last name. And he must be Catholic because they wanted an annulment so they could get married in the church. And so we filed for an annulment, and the reason that the Catholic Church said it was okay for Sheri to have her marriage annulled is that I treated all our money like it was my money. And I went and saw a nun who was part of this process, and she said, that's the problem, the biggest problem in your marriage. And I went, I don't think anyone within any circle of friends we have has had a better life when it comes to consumerism than Sheri Dawson. So, it was all my money. It was my money that I spent on her. So I thought that was a total crock of shit. And then I said the infamous words, and oh, by the way, it is my money. I earn it. She earns nothing. Yeah. Here's a small one that's a huge one. My password, like 30 plus years ago, maybe pushing 40, my password was marriage. And maybe something on the front or the back, but marriage. And at some point, my password became divorce, because divorce was constantly on my mind, the way marriage was in the good password days. We used to go on houseboats in the Ozarks. Below Lake of the Ozarks is Bull Shoals Lake, equally huge, much less traveled, and we did that probably for like 5 years. We did a weekend first, loved it. The next year we did a week, and then a week from there forward. I enjoyed being in the water, taking off my swim trunks, putting them on my head like a hat, and singing my famous houseboat song. And let me just give you a fairly clean version of it. Well, hold it. Well, on your food, you might put salt that you lick. Well, myself, I have a massive arm. And they always ended with arm. On our 40th birthdays, we went on a cruise to Hawaii. And as we did back in those days, even though I treated it like it was my money, we go on this cruise, it's a week. There are 6 suites on the top floor of the cruise ship. And the roofs were all glass or plexiglass, so hail didn't kill them. So we had at night this beautiful view of the stars. And it is a good example of my theory of go big or stay home. I gave her 2 options. We can go on this fabulous Hawaii cruise, or we can get your $300 wedding ring upgraded, to 10 grand or whatever. She chose the cruise in lieu of the ring, and in part because her good friends, Boulay and Donahue and whomever, told her, hell, he'll buy the ring anyway. Go on the cruise. While we were in Hawaii, humpback whales were around at that time of year. We were out on a catamaran, and a humpback whale came flat toward us, perpendicular. You know, we were here, and the humpback is coming across that way. It got underneath us, which was freaky, because all it has to do is kind of go, ugh, and we're capsized. Gets underneath us and like properly the same amount on this side as this side, rolls on its side and looks up at us. So we're just looking at this massive whale eye, and it sat there for a few minutes and took off. Totally cool. We have done as a fam quite a bit of snorkeling. I am now scared to death to snorkel and to scuba. I don't know where this started, but I get my face in the water and I'm like, maybe minus the coughing, but point being, I'm breathing it out. I can't catch my breath. I have no idea why. Kind of like snow skiing, which I used to do and wasn't all that bad at it. And I am scared shitless to snow ski. I will never do it again, nor will I ever scuba or snorkel. Sheri and I walked to the top of the Statue of Liberty on one of our New York City trips. Cool to say you did it. You're up there in the crown with these little windows. You can look out. At the base, they told you this is a complete waste of time. You're going to see nothing, all but the last 5 feet. You're going to be completely enclosed. They were right. However, we can say we walked to the top of the Statue of Liberty. We also took the elevator to the top of the Twin Towers observation deck. Cool, but ick. All right, that's enough Sheri Dawson stuff. 33 minutes, 17 seconds and counting, which is just about perfect. The next is Fifi. Not that I didn't love Sheri Dawson, but for some reason, I have more stuff on Fifi in our less than 5 years together than I have on Sheri and our 20 years together. Do not tell her. Sheri, not Fifi. I'll be back.